you everybody for giving us your Saturday and being here. We have lots to do, and so if there are any comments beforehand, go right ahead, and if not, I'll just have Loretta and Janina put on their show.
I'll give you a little bit of a heads up on how we've got it laid out for today. We've invited Ray to come this morning, and he has brought the consultant that you've authorized us to retain to do a study of our park system. And the objective this morning is going to be to let him explain generally what they do as the overview, but then to try to focus in on I guess the top 3 or so parks that you would like them to start with. Their intent would be to try to give us a very detailed plan for those top 3 parks that we can incorporate into our budget process. If you recall, we've been setting aside money every year for miscellaneous park improvements, and we hope this will allow us to focus in on exactly how to spend those dollars best within the park system, and then in future phases, we can go ahead and do some of the other parks. So we would want to start with that this morning, and then Ray has just a couple of other things in his arena he'd like to discuss once that's complete. And then Mike Collins will be joining us around 9:30. We have a pretty good discussion there about wayfinding signs and branding that we'd like to do. And then when they complete that, Janina will do our finance report from Tuesday night that we didn't get to do, and then a little bit of an overview for the upcoming year's budget. We'll break for lunch, and then in the afternoon, Chris has a little update on our capital projects. We're shooting to try to be done by 2, and of course we'll stay as long as you like and answer as many questions as you might have. At the end, we've also allowed some time just if there's any direction you'd like to give us for things you would like us working on in preparation of the budget, or just any other discussions of things you might want us to work on. So with that, we'll ask, where did Ray go? Ray, kind of hard to get started with Ray with no Ray. So, but anyway, we will. We'll start with Ray, and we'll just kind of go through that. We've got about an hour allocated for that.
Sorry.
Ray, you brought first.
You brought Linus back up? Did you bring
I know
Linus
she had
back
the
up?
key for the thermostat, so.
Yeah.
Don't get too crazy there now.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead and get warm.
So Ray, I've given them a little overview of what we're trying to accomplish this morning, so if you want to go ahead and kick us off and get started.
Okay.
Introduce your guest, please.
The first topic is park planning. This is Sam Jones. Sam works for GSBS, who we've engaged for the park planning project that you all funded in the
And
budget
Ray, it
for
may be
this year.
helpful if y'all would just go stand up there a little bit, and that way y'all can, everybody can see you as you're talking.
If their necks don't hurt by the end of the day.
Yeah. And we can turn that projector light off. Yeah, there you go, so you're not blinded. It's
We'll split it. So Sam was able to join us this morning because we wanted to make sure that based on last year when I was here talking about what we need to do in our park system, that we have a clear understanding of the mission that we need to accomplish with this project. So where we are now is, as I said, we've engaged GSBS. They've done a little initial evaluation of our park system. Sam's been out and he's driven around and looked at our park system. He's gotten a lot of great information, mapping information, demographic information from David Allen. And what we intend to do is to, it's kind of a more than just go out and look at our parks and kind of tell us what you think and what you think we might need. What we really intend to accomplish with this project is to, Sam and his folks will go around and do a thorough evaluation of what currently is in our park system, using also our Parks Master Plan as a tool for that. But they're also going to go beyond that and try to study and evaluate what's around those particular parks. What could be developed, whether in the park or what is planning to be developed around the park, so that we make sure that as we go into the future, we're meeting the needs of what our citizens may want at whatever build out that might be, whether it's outside the park or within the park. So in addition to that, and after talking to Sam and his folks, is that it looks as though this is going to need to go beyond just what we originally thought would just kind of be a one-time project. Because there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot going on in our city. And it's important that through this study, we come back and are able to provide a very accurate plan and a detailed plan of what you all charged me with last year, which is to see what we're going to need to do in the next 10 years or so, beyond what's just in the master plan. So given that, I wanted Sam to come and he can give just kind of a brief description of his firm's background, what projects they've worked on. I met Sam and his group when we were interviewing firms for the Family Life Center and was very impressed with them then. And so through Mike Lowry, we reached out to his firm and hoped that they would respond to our proposal, and they did. So I was excited about that because they've done some great projects. If you're familiar at all with the city of Burleson and their parks and recreation facilities over the last probably 10 years or so, all that planning work was done by GSBS. Peter Krause, the now retired director there, who used to work here at Euless, his dad was mayor. I've known Peter 25 years, so through watching what Burleson has done and knowing that GSBS was very instrumental in the planning and the facilities that they had now, that's one reason why I was excited to see that they were responsive to our proposal and that we're going to have the opportunity to work with them. I think they're a great firm and look forward to this. So what we want to today accomplish is, as I said, this is going to go beyond just let's bring you a recommendation for all parks. To do what you all have charged me to do, we really need to focus on probably the top 3 parks in our park system at this time. We know immediately we can carve out some, like the Parks at Texas Star. We have a master plan for the Parks at Texas Star. We're accomplishing the things that are on the master plan for the Parks at Texas Star. I don't want for his firm to spend a lot of time studying a park that we already know what our future is for that facility. But what we do want them to do is to spend the time necessary on those parks and facilities that we, through this discussion today, determine as what we would think is our probably top 3 or so, that they can go back and really, they're going to give an overview of all of them, but really focus on the top probably 3. So that's what we want to try to accomplish today. So with that, I'll let Sam talk real briefly about his firm and what we intend to do as a team on this project. And then hopefully in a discussion here, we can make recommendations and try to pick out what those parks are that you all want us to focus on. So,
thank you, Ray. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you all. We're your neighbor. We're in North Richland Hills. I live in Arlington, so I'm very much connected with what's going on in this area and understand where we are with this. So I'm not an outside person coming in. We are an architecture firm, GSBS. We have an office in North Richland Hills and one in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have 12 professionals in the office here and 65 in our office in Salt Lake. We are not a niche or a focused firm overall, but we do, out of this office, about 60 to 70% of our work is municipal related services, primarily municipal facilities within that, whether that's city halls, fire station, recreation centers, parks, and other planning work peripheral to all of that. So this is very much in our wheelhouse of types of projects to work within. I'm a landscape architect. I'm part of the ownership group of GSBS. There are 2 of the owners here and the rest of our ownership groups in Salt Lake City. So just a quick overview with that. So I'm not a niche planner, and I think that brings to the table a little bit broader view of most of the way that we approach projects, because we try to look at things not with a narrow focus, but with a very broad focus overall, so that we're bringing the best of everything that we've learned on all of our other projects to bear on every project that we work on. As Ray's mentioned, what we're going to be proposing to do on this project is to take a kind of a quick snapshot overview of your entire system, just to give a evaluation and comparison to NRPR standards, so that we know where you are from a comparative standpoint. We're not trying to, grade it necessarily up or down. You've got a great park system and great staff that's been working with that over the years, which is evidence of the dedication that you all have put into that and the focus for the community here. So that's working great. I can tell that just by the quick observations that we've done. So all we're really looking at wanting to do within that is get a good understanding and handle on where you will stack up from those comparative data standpoints so that we can look at the service areas for each of the individual parks and understand what services you need to be offering there, what you are offering, how that compares to the community itself that it's serving, to make sure that you're projecting appropriately into the future to have the services at those parks that are going to best serve that group of people. We've begun that evaluation. As Ray said, we got the GIS data set from the city that you all have already provided and paid for, and we're using that as our basis, so we're not out mapping things unnecessarily at this point. We will be gaining a little bit more information from park staff as we get into this a little bit further and start that assemblage of information. I've begun some of my park visits, kind of a cursory overview first, just so that I've got my head around what you really have. And I'm about halfway through with that so far. We'll be finalizing that up over the next couple of weeks. And then following that, Ray and I'll probably be getting together real quick just to make sure that I'm given an appropriate representation of what you have and make sure I'm not missing anything. We're going to rely heavily upon staff because these guys are with us every day and they understand it better than anybody else does. And again, I'm not trying to reinvent what they're doing. I want to pull from their resource with all of that. Once we get through that initial set and with your input today, what we're going to do is identify the top 2 to 3 that really need some focus at this point in time and give concerted effort for clear evaluations within those parks of what services are there and what need to be there. It's likely that there's going to be some optional things that we're going to need to explore, some what-if type statements, and we're prepared to do that within this to where you've got an existing old city swimming pool in one park. There's not necessarily a desire to maintain that, or is that the best thing to maintain? But if that came out, what are we going to do there instead? What other services need to be offered in lieu of that? And every park is going to have its own unique situations based on the terrain and the community that it serves. So what's best going to serve that community today? And looking at the projections based on the growth within those areas at the 5, 10, and just 20-year interval, so that you're looking long range as to what needs to go on with that. As we get through those evaluations, we'll be putting some specific graphic plans together of those what-if statements, and then providing some opinion of probable cost so that you all have some tools from a budgetary standpoint to make some decisions on those types of development. And then through some staff evaluation, we'll probably go through some prioritization statements with that too, because there'll probably be multiple things in paths that you could take, but which are going to have the best impacts. And I don't have any idea what those are at this point in time, but that'll be part of the evaluation that we're going to be going through to help you and guide you through some of that decision process. None of this is construction related at this point. This is all planning. So what this is teeing up is a series of projects for you all to consider where you want to spend your money, where you're best going to serve your the people in the community itself and give them what they need in the way of the park system. And that's what we're here to do, is just to help you get to that point. We started the evaluation. We just need to hear from you all as to where your focus needs to be so that we're not running in one direction when you want us to go in someplace else. And that's really kind of what I understand today's check is about.
Right. So where that brings us today. Over the last several years, you all have seen in the budget documents, CIP projects that we have identified and have at least put into the budget book so that we could get it on the radar. Many of those we've already accomplished. The Family Life Center was one several years ago. What we're working on now with the 69th field at the Parks of Texas Star is another one. We've got the trail project through Blessing Branch that has been identified. We've got trail work all through the trails of Euless from Bob Eden Park to the villages of Bear Creek. South Euless was on there a couple years ago. Now we've done lots of work in South Euless, still more to go. So that's what we wanted to do today, was to, through this discussion, instead of having kind of a scattershot of CIP projects out there that certainly I can recommend to you all, but we want to make sure that what we as a staff are bringing forward for recommendation in the budget is what we need to focus on here today through this process. So with that, and this is assumptions on my part, I would say that from the staff recommendation standpoint, we would lift up, obviously, car park. Lots of discussion on car park over the last few years. You know, we could throw South Euless in there, but we've got a plan for South Euless, a plan that we've been working on, and we're, you know, probably within maybe 12 months of completing that. Sam mentioned, and we all know, Wilshire Park is another one that, you know, there's been a CIP sheet in the books for years. We've kind of been hanging on. That's been our philosophy is, you know, we provide a service there. Let's keep providing that service as long as the service holds out. But at some point, we all know, you know, that's going to go away. So what do we do with that? So maybe that's another one that we would need to focus on. We've mentioned West Park a time or two through the years. You know, are we currently meeting the needs, or what will the needs be in the future? We've got some practice fields there that we use for baseball. We also use for flag football. Is there a better use for that? What could that be? Midway Park is another one. Although we've completed the facility part of that master plan, we've not extended outside of that. And there has been a master plan that we worked on as a group a number of years ago. So maybe that's one that we really need to focus on, because we now that we have the vertical structures, what do we need to do to the rest of the parkland there? So that's what we're hoping that we can try to nail down here today. So your thoughts?
Well, Ray, you know that my big focus, and I think you hit on the nail head, car park. I mean, that's very important in South Euless. And I know there's a lot of people down there may not want a lot of changes done to it, but that's a very unique piece of property. We need parking, we need better facilities, and just to, I mean, and so I'm very interested to see how we're going to address that car park, how we're going to assess the demographic that uses that park, assess the expectations of those who use that park and the people who live in South Euless. So that's what I hope we come out of this, is to address car park. And then, you know, I would think that would be our major focus. I agree that West Park is a need and Wilshire is a need, but car park really hasn't had anything done to it, you know, almost 30 years.
Right.
I would like to see us go towards Midway Park. It's like a gateway into our recreational opportunities in Euless. And it's, more people probably see that park than any other park in the city.
Yes, ma'am.
Plus, when we put all that money into the, like you said, the vertical, and we did have that really nice plan, you know, I think we had, supposed to have sand volleyball up there and a lot of different things.
Yes, sir.
And we haven't finished it. To me, I mean, car park, I agree with Perry, is something that, but it serves, or it's, the amount of people that go to car park is much less than the ones who go to Midway. But I think if we're gonna figure the top 2 or 3, car park's gotta be in there, Midway Park's gotta be in there. You know, West Park, I never see anybody, there's some kids ride their bikes, I don't see anybody else ever in there. So I'm not sure, because the people it serves actually is across West Park, and then the people in Bedford.
Right.
So I mean, to me, West Park would be pretty far down my priority list.
So I have a question, and thank you for bringing up the whole Blessing Branch and the trail connection. Would we have to stabilize that bank of the creek that goes along through there? I think where I was kind of leaning to as well is, we've got all that development going on, we've got some assistance from the developer to build in his own internal trail connections to a pathway that could go through Blessing Branch to Midway, and therefore we could get foot traffic instead of vehicle traffic to a Midway Park situation. But I was asking, if we put a trail connection through Blessing Branch all the way to Midway, does that need to stabilize that creek bank?
That's a great question, and you're touching on the topic. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, because that's about a half-day discussion in
Okay.
itself. Creek protection, but to answer your question, today, if we were to do that trail, I don't believe that we would need to stabilize the bank of the creek. That being said, we all know, those of us who have been here long enough to see what's happened to our trail system from Bob Eden to the villages of Bear Creek. I can say we don't need to stabilize the bank of the creek today. That's not to say that in 10 years from now, it might not be a top priority. In fact, and I've talked to Ms. Getchell about this, and Mr. Barker and Hal Craner, his team, and I've got some folks through the Parks Department that we've kind of joined forces in what we're going to do, and in the process of doing right now, and you'll see this come forward as CIP projects proposed for next year, is that we started at Bob Eden, and we're going to walk every square inch of creek all the way down to the villages of Bear Creek, and we're going to identify kind of twofold. One is, what are the immediate needs that if we don't do something soon, we're going to have bigger problems on our hands, and we've already identified some of those. Some of that work is going to be done with joint forces from Public Works and Parks. Some is going to be contracted out. Then what we're going to do is identify those areas that if we don't do something within the next few years, it's going to cause much bigger problems. And those are the ones that you're probably going to see as CIP projects in the budget. They're going to be expensive projects, but there's a picture, and had I known we would talk about this, I'd have brought it. But Terry, we bought a laser measuring tape. And at the villages of Bear Creek, there's one particular area that from the day we opened that park till now, which was 25 years ago, it has eroded back more than 100 feet. At Joyce Court, when we used to mow Joyce Court, we used to pull the maintenance trucks around the gate and into the park. Now the creek is at the gate. So we've lost a lot of parkland due to erosion. So yes, sir, we're on that. We're evaluating. We'll be bringing those projects forward. But as you asked about Blessing Branch, we could do that project today and not have to do anything to the creek, but we would certainly need to know that at some point we will need to do something to the creek.
And that creek would more than likely look like what Midway Park currently, just concrete channel kind of situation all the way.
Well, I don't know if it'd be that. It would probably be some bank stabilization, whether that be like what you see out here at Texas Star,
Okay.
or perhaps Gabion baskets. That's what we're in the process of trying to evaluate right now. In fact, I was talking to Terry yesterday about calling Knight, because they do that kind of work, and having them go out and just giving us some estimate on various areas that are going to need to be addressed in the near future.
Okay.
Yeah, and the cost of that work can be incredibly expensive, depending on when you're talking about concrete line channels. I mean, that is very impractical in most areas, so you really are talking more about trying to stabilize areas with the sandbags and with the gating walls and things like that. And then the question becomes, is where can you stop that work so that you don't create another problem?
Right.
And so that becomes, it is, that will be a multi-year project that we will just have to prioritize areas that are,
Okay.
if you can move the trail and just allow the creek to continue to take its natural path and continue to have areas, you know, that certainly is less expensive, because any of that creek work is very, very expensive. There may be areas where that you simply are going to lose all your land and have no ability to function without some stabilization. So, but just simply going in and concrete lining it is really not practical in most areas.
The environmental impacts of that type of approach is usually far-reaching too, both in the immediate area and downstream, because of the acceleration of the velocity of the water and the impacts that you're just pushing off further downstream. And that typically is not the best practice approach that we have seen.
Okay.
Ray, I have a couple of questions directly for you.
Yes, sir.
Because I respect you in your job, and you're the professional. You know, I look to you for vision. You know, what's your vision for our parks? I look to you for the vision what our Parks Board has. And then our changing demographic and our population. As our population increases, our demographic changes. I assume you're putting that in your vision. So I look to you for that. So, you know, that, I guess I'd like to hear that today.
Well, okay, and let's start at car, because I think that's a good example of a demographic that uses that park today compared to, I think, a drastic change in age demographic that'll be using that park 10 years from now. And we all know South Euless is an aging community, and I think what we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years is some younger families moving into South Euless, renovating the property, the house. So I think we're going to see more of that. So I think it's important that as Sam and I work through this process, that we take into consideration those type of factors, that we can plan today on what we think the use of car needs to be, but that's not going to be the use of car 10 years from now, because the age demographic in South Euless over the next 10 years, I think, is going to flip-flop. And so it's important for us to recognize that and to plan for that. And not only there, but in the other areas, as the mayor said at Midway Park, and what Mr. Senator was talking about. I mean, we see that that area and what's going on there, and not only just at Midway Park, but go east of there with the trail connection to Riverwalk. I mean, the use of Midway Park is going to change over the next 10 years from what we know today. So yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what you charged us with, and that's why we've engaged with Sam's firm, because we have to look beyond what's recognizable today and plan for that in the future, because we have to know that, you know, the services that we provide today will not be the services that we need to provide 10 years from now. It may be completely different.
And you're at an appropriate point right now to be able to get ahead of that curve so that you are providing the appropriate service at that point in time, at that 10 and 20-year interval. So this is the time to be thinking about that type of thing.
And that, when I started out, I mentioned that, and that's why, you know, one of the things that Sam and I have talked about is that it's important for us to recognize whatever these top three are, what's going on around it, whether it's commercial, residential, so that we can determine what those needs that will need to be met, what those are, and make sure that we're meeting those. Because with the growth of this city and what's coming in, and the commercial boom at Glade Parks versus the residential boom out there around the old Arbor Day site, I mean, we've got to make sure that we're making the right decisions to make the right connections so that our community can enjoy the services that we provide as we go into the future.
And I know this is probably already thrown in there, but I assume you want to address special needs too.
Absolutely, yeah, that has to be part of it.
Right.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Carr Park, and if we can, you know, get back to try to identify these top three, because I know y'all got a long day ahead, but you mentioned that, and I mean, so my question is then, or I guess my statement on that would be, for us, it needs to go beyond just the grounds and what we're providing there. And remember that through this study will be revealed that there are parks that we don't meet the current Americans with Disabilities Act's standards. And so what we do at Carr Park is going to trigger a much bigger project than just adding a play unit, for instance. You mentioned parking. You modify parking, you got to modify the building. I mean, you modify the building, then it triggers everything else. I mean, so one triggers another. We absolutely will work on Carr Park, but just understand that this recommendation will go far beyond what will be on the grounds. It will be what needs to happen to the entire park, including the building at that particular park. And then with that, I needed to just clarify so that Sam and I know, does Carr Park include kitty car?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just plan that as one single park location. So we've got car, kitty car as one. I'm here at Midway Park as another. Is there a third? Sam's asked that we in order to get the best bang for the project, because that's what we really need to focus on, so I'm.
Critical thing with that too, just so that you all understand, Ray gave me an initial charge of we're doing the entire system this way. And he asked me if within the budget that we had, was that possible? And as we've studied it, it is not. Because the level of evaluation and recommendation goes much beyond what you all have budgeted for in this fiscal year. But what we're hopeful to do is put in the framework by which you can continue to add the evaluations of the other parks when your priority for those is appropriate to do so. So we're focusing right now on the key park issues, but that's after we've done this global analysis of the entire system. And there may be other things that we can identify that, you know, after you do these first couple, here's the next ones that we're recommending you may need to look at quickly in this next year, or whatever your priority is going to be. So it's not the intent that this is the only two that we're looking at, but within the budget constraints that we've been given to work with at the point, that's all that we have the resources to do.
Well, it seems to me that Wilshire has to
Yeah.
be part of it, because we
Yeah.
know we've been nursing along a
Mhm.
facility that we've been nursing along.
Right.
And we know that's gonna be an expensive project to repair or replace, or however we choose, but it would seem to me that that's gotta be a top priority about what this use of that park.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that decision may be made for us here in about the next 45 days.
Yeah.
Well, I'm quite sure it probably will be made for us.
Of course, we say that every year, and somehow that thing lives through another year. I don't understand
Or at least
how.
part of
Yeah.
the year.
Yeah.
It's like a snake, it just, you know, it just won't die, you gotta cut the head off, so.
Mr. Zimmer, did you have a comment there?
Just Jeremy's idea of trails in the Midway Park has always seemed to be a priority to me. And it's the same for Car Park and Moonshot. Having a little square block in the middle of a neighborhood is park. But having feeders that connect Car Park to maybe south, feeders that connect into the community, that connect into Midway, connect into Woodshire. That feeder idea is what it feels to me.
Right. So I think we've got,
Are there any specific amenities that you all feel like we're missing throughout the city? Obviously, they're gonna be looking at the demographics and coming up with their recommendations, but are there any specific amenities that you mentioned the additional trails or feeders, anything else that we need to add to that list?
I think we need to look at some of the playground equipment, because I do think some of our playground equipment has gotten fairly old, right, Ray?
yes ma'am,
And they have some really new fun things out.
And I
really
think,
new, fun, expensive things out.
I know.
well, I think we need to look at some more sand volleyball courts. I mean, the sand volleyball courts at Bud Eden are always packed.
Yeah.
It seems to me we've gotta have another place.
Well, the original plan was to have those also at Midway.
Midway, uh-huh.
That was the original drawing, which I think would be
Right.
really good.
And I think Ray has suggested in the past with more folks trying to be health conscious, having more of the ways that you can exercise as you're going along the trails, actually having, what do you
Fitness
call those?
stations.
The fitness
Yeah.
Outdoor
stations
fitness parks.
along the park system where you actually can stop and do some various activities throughout the park. So that's one of the things, but are there other things that you all would like them to add to the list?
So I just kind of asked to look at the lighting, if we could move to an LED lighting that's a little bit more brighter, more secure, if that's an opportunity.
And the parks that we currently offer,
Yes.
right? Okay, yes, sir.
Well, yeah, and they're really cost effective. We're doing that in a lot of my properties, and you get a payback in a year and a half to 2 years on most of those now. And the maintenance of those things, those lights, usually looking at 8 years before you have to replace anything. You don't have any ballast, so it's really the way to go.
I'm
I
pretty-
like that Sam's nodding.
Yeah,
We just did the new Northeastern County Courthouse,
yeah.
and that's 100% LED fixtures throughout, inside and outside of that entire facility.
I'm very impressed with City Hall and the library, how their lighting has turned out for the parking lots.
Well, Ray, do you
Right.
send out what you need then?
I believe so.
Yes, we got our march.
Okay.
Thank y'all very
Yeah,
much.
And what is your time frame to have the initial?
We don't have anything specific set with that. This was the only date that we knew that was hypercritical. And that's why I went ahead and jumped ahead and did a little bit of some of the evaluation, so I had my head around some of what was going on. Ray and I will be talking about that. We're probably looking at around a 4 to 5 month total duration before we'll be finished. But there'll be comment and component input from them constantly within that. And I suspect that after this initial evaluation, there may be something we discover, I don't know if it's going to be there or not, that we need to bring back and say, hey, we found this and you might want to take a look at this. So there might be some refocusing as we go through some of this as well.
Probably the most critical date we'll have to be able to, or would need some direction by would be our June CIP meeting, when we're meeting with the city council to discuss the projects for the upcoming year, at least if there's anything we need to focus on for the upcoming budget year for that. So and that is at the end of June.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for coming and
Thanks
joining
for
us
having
this
me.
morning, Sam. And
Appreciate your
thank
time
you
this
for your
morning.
Saturday. So.